You're moving your camera. What are you doing? Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of Not Your Normal Hockey Podcast. I'm Julie Robenhymer, joined by Brian Hedger, and we are so excited to do this for you today, even though we are not together. Sadly, I am back home, and you, Brian, are in Columbus.
Yes, I'm. Yes, Central Ohio, we'll say, to be accurate.
Okay, that's fair. Southern New Jersey.
We're very accurate on this podcast.
Yeah, Southern New Jersey, to be accurate, right here.
Perfect.
So I want to chat with you a little bit. You had sent me a text message about TNT's first preseason broadcast. And of course, that brings up the whole debate and discussion over ESPN as the new rights holder in the United States for the NHL. TNT has picked up some of the extra games. All of the games are going to be available on ESPN Plus, as NHL TV is no longer, which, truth be told, I'm super pumped about that. I hated buying a subscription. This is my rant for the minute. Yeah. I won't even say for the day, but this is my rant for the minute. I hated having a subscription to Center Ice and not being able to watch any games while I was on the road, which was like 90% of the time. So like the $100 and some odd bucks that I spent for Center Ice, I maybe saw 10 games at home. So I hated that.
I thought it was more of a problem in the home markets.
Well, it's a problem in the home markets because you still can't watch, the games. Like, so for example, I live in the Philadelphia market. So if I want to watch a Flyers game, I have to subscribe to Comcast Sportsnet, which I do not. I am a Dish subscriber. So I would have to go to a bar to watch the Flyers play if I want, or go
if you didn't have the local cable or whatever.
Right. Well, the challenge is that Comcast owns the Flyers, right? So
right. Yeah.
they specifically say, like, if I had Verizon or whatever, I still wouldn't be able to get it. I could only watch the Flyers games if I have Comcast.
Is any of this going to change with ESPN Plus? I think I don't know that answer, and I think there's some uncertainty still with like that. I mean, now for me, I ended up getting for the last few years, I had like the blackout lifted version of the NHL TV, so through the league and kind of thing like that. So it helped me in going to each of these rinks because I could access it on my laptop and I could look up plays, as they happened and that kind of thing, and say, hey, this is what really happened. That actually helped me. And it was all centralized in the team's website. So now I don't know how it's going to work. Are you going to have to get an ESPN Plus subscription and then a separate one for TNT? Are they going to have these things through the league website? Like, how's this going to work?
That's a really good question. It's my understanding that everything is going to be on ESPN Plus except for in-market games. Like, there's still going to be that in-market blackout.
Oh.
But I would much rather pay, I think it's $5 or maybe $6 a month for ESPN Plus than it was for NHL TV.
But are they gonna? So but those ESPN Plus games, like the $6 that you pay per month or whatever, is there gonna be a blackout associated with those?
I think only for local markets. So like if the IP address that I'm logging in on is in Philadelphia, I would be blocked out of the Philadelphia game.
But isn't that the same as it was before?
Yes, you just don't have to pay an arm and a leg for it. But that's the thing. So like the whole idea of the blackout, right? For local blackouts is that you should be able to get that through your own provider. So like I can go online and log into Dish and watch something on Dish. So I'm assuming that it would be the same if I had, for example, in Philly, Comcast, and I would just be able to go log in with my Comcast information and then have access to it.
Okay.
So it's just like anything else where like if I go to ABC and I want to watch a show that aired yesterday, and there's always like that week thing that says it's not available for free until a week, but within that week you can log in with your cable or satellite provider and have access to it immediately. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be
Is what I'm
interesting
thinking.
because you still have the regional broadcasts, right? Then a lot of those are through Bally Sports now. Yeah, here in Ohio, it's Bally Sports Ohio, I believe. I don't know if they're regionalizing it throughout the state or whatever. I think they still are. But you're gonna have those. You're gonna have the ESPN broadcast, national broadcasts, and then you're gonna have TNT as well. And it's all. I mean, it's what's really interesting too with the broadcast is that you're having some of the same faces and names that we got used to over the past however many years on NBC, and they're just flipping stations. Like they're just going over, and it's going to be some of the same people. So, what's going to be new and that kind of thing. And I saw some of the stuff that they were doing on the first broadcast, and it was it was a rough one. I'm going to give them every benefit of the doubt on this because I think I know for a fact this is why they did it. Who does a national broadcast of a preseason game, right? But this is a whole new venture for TNT, Turner, whatever, ESPN, all them. I think it's smart to do the preseason games and get these things out of the way, but there were some major flaws and just weird stuff that happened in the broadcast. At one point it looked like a Wayne's World episode. Like the second period was it was like the screen was split into 3 different like horizontal screens, and like the middle one you could see the game, and the top 2 were like something else. Like it was like broadcasting something else. So the game was in the middle, like third of the screen. It's so weird. And then like I don't know if they did this on purpose. They clearly were having technical difficulties in that. From when I turned it on in the second period, this was the Bruins and Flyers, I believe, were playing. And when I turned it on, it was like at ice level. Like the broadcast was at ice level. Like in other words, the camera was clearly stationed on top of the glass, I think behind the benches. And it was like watching something from like your PlayStation 5 or whatever, like when you're playing a game.
Was this on Monday?
I can't remember the exact day. All the days are running together right now, Julie.
Because I watched the Bruins and the Flyers, but I was at a bar having dinner with my mother.
Okay. Well, it might have been.
So I was watching the local broadcast. I wasn't watching.
Oh, right. So this was, it was Bruins Flyers. I believe it was in Boston, and it was on TNT, Turner. Yeah. And Turner broadcast. And it was just like, I remember sitting there thinking.
Here's the thing. TNT has never broadcast a hockey game.
Right.
Ever.
No.
So, like you said, it's the preseason. Let's try some things, maybe things that work in other sports, other broadcasts. Could they be applied in hockey? Will they work in hockey? It sounds like no.
Well, what's funny is, the angle that they were showing for that second period was the angle that you get when a goal is scored, and they want to give you like that different angle of what it looked like from almost like ice level. Like they were just showing that as the regular broadcast feed. And I'm like, are you kidding me with this? Like it was just sweeping back and forth, and you're like sitting there going like this back and forth. It was horrible. And I'm like, are they so it made you wonder, are they trying this to see what the reaction will be? Are they running this up the flagpole, or is there some kind of technical difficulty? And it turned out that they said it's technical difficulty, but magically, of course, it cleared itself up completely for the third period, and they went to a more normal, usual broadcast angle, like a more aerial. And that one actually looked really good. I like that one a lot. I have to give them credit. Like, they pulled it together pretty fast. But then there was also like they did the studio stuff in studio for the second intermission I watched. And so they had Liam McHugh on there, I believe. I think he's the studio host again. Like he came over from NBC. I like him a lot. Anson Carter, like him a lot too. He was on there. But the chemistry, for whatever reason, just kind of seemed a little stiff in there. They also had Rick Tocchet in there, and because which is good because you're like, well, this is cool. This guy was a recent NHL coach. He's actually a pretty personable, he's got a good personality, I should say, strong personality. But the chemistry between the three of them was just kind of rigid and not there yet. And then they brought in for all these channels now. I mean, all these broadcasting companies, whenever they do a sports broadcast, they all have to have, and the NFL started this, but they all have to have their officiating expert, right? Like you got to have this former referee who's there as like the expert that can explain how this rule is like interpreted and all that. Well, the one for this broadcast is apparently going to be Don Koharski, which, it just kind of makes me laugh because Don Koharski is one of the most like hated referees in the history of the league, especially by Devils fans or was it Bruins? I can't remember what is so far back in like 1988 with the whole famous what was it, the eat another donut Don or something like that. It was like this big thing. You guys can Google it. I just did. It was funny. But anyway, Don Koharski's on there. And speaking of Wayne's World, Koharski was mentioned in that movie as well. So it was just weird. I mean, he just looked so uncomfortable, like so just not comfortable in his role, because what they do with those guys is they're remote somewhere like we're doing right now. And so like they're trying to have like a kind of a laughing, kind of a light moment. And there's three of them in the studio and he's there and there's like a time delay, it feels like. And so they have some issues to work out with that broadcast. I think there's some potential there. I guess I wanted to talk about it because I feel I'm kind of excited for the change. I'm definitely excited to see the NHL get back on ESPN. I'm super excited to see John Buccigross involved highly in the NHL again. I've always respected his work, and he knows hockey like the back of his hand, and it does just a superior job at broadcasting it. I like him. So I like bringing all that stuff back into it. I'm excited to see what they got, but I'm just, boy, that first one was kind of rough. So I'm giving them as much benefit of the doubt and leeway and slack and however you want to say it as possible. I think it can't get too much crazier than it was in the first one. And I'm sure it's going to get better as we go along. But I just was curious, as someone who has done, TV video yourself, what you had thought about it, but you might not have checked that out. Maybe even, I mean, I'm sure there's some good YouTube stuff of it because it was pretty crazy.
It sounds like there would be, but also I want to make the distinction that TNT and ESPN are not the same company, so like
Right.
their crews are totally different.
Totally.
I too am excited about ESPN back in the mix with hockey, but I think mostly I'm excited about having more than one network broadcasting games, because
Right.
it always was the same group. Like people, oh, there were some games on ABC. It's the same people.
Right.
Over
Yeah.
and over and over and over and over again. And so I like now that there are, two networks involved, and that ESPN has taken on the internet broadcast, the streaming of it,
Yeah.
as well, instead of having like another thing you have to pay for with the NHL. So
Right.
I like all of that. And I like the team that ESPN has. I love Emily Kaplan and Linda Cohn doing a podcast for ESPN as well. I think it's called In the Crease, if I remember correctly. So I'm excited about that. I think Emily did a fantastic job during the draft for ESPN. She's done a lot of great work for Around the Horn and really just kind of planting the seeds of hockey throughout ESPN's landscape the past couple years that she's been there and been their senior writer. And of course, written some knockout features, which is always exciting to read in general. And then, like you said, I'm super excited for John Buccigross to have more exposure in the hockey world. I mean, we all know how much he loves hockey, and he's been banging the drum for college hockey because that's what ESPN has. They have the rights for NCAA regionals and the Frozen Four. So, he's kind of been able to flex his hockey muscles on that front. So it'll be exciting to see. I had asked you before, because I don't know the answer to the question, is if we are going to get the return of NHL Tonight, which, like, legit, I grew up on NHL Tonight, and I'll tell a story.
Okay.
So when I was in like 7th grade, there were these boys in my class, and you know, they were boys. They were 13-year-old boys. And I was hearing them talk about the Flyers.
Sorry to interrupt. Is this before or after your movie debut?
This was before.
This before, but not long before. What movie were you in again?
I was 15 in that movie.
Which movie was it again?
It was In and Out.
In and Out, and you are like a
okay. So now wait a minute to catch people up.
Expert,
so what happened was I was driving somewhere, and I called Brian to talk about probably this podcast or a game or something. This is how this podcast started. We'll talk on the phone. We're like, man, that was really good. We should have recorded that. That would have been a great podcast. And that's how this
good podcast. Yes.
That's how this show started. So anyways, we were talking, and my mom called me. So I hung up with Brian and was talking to my mom. And then I hung up with her and I called Brian back. And then my mom called me back to tell me that she had watched, quote, my movie.
Your movie.
My movie. And mind you, I did not have a speaking role in this movie, but this movie did give me my SAG card. So I am a member of the Screen Actors Guild, which is pretty cool. But
how awesome is that? Do you keep it up? Do you keep your SAG card up?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a lot for the dues, and you get free movies. So
wait. You get free movies?
Yeah, they send you like DVDs, or they send you login codes to watch the movies to vote for the SAG Awards.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Like, that alone is worth keeping up your membership.
We should all be extras in a movie at some point.
Well, you have to work at it.
That's true.
I happen to get lucky, though.
So anyway, you were 15 when that happened.
Yeah.
13, 2 years earlier, which actually in the big picture time is nothing. 2 years earlier, you're in school, correct?
Yeah.
And it's 13-year-old boys, and they're being 13-year-old boys, which they should scare everybody being 13-year-old boys. And you can take it away from there.
So they were talking about the Flyers, and I'm very opinionated now. I was very opinionated then. And I had no problem jumping into their conversation and saying, like, well, actually, and this was right around like the start of the Legion of Doom.
Okay.
And so, like, they were talking something, and I was like, oh, well, blah, 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 whatever my thought or opinion was. And the one guy goes, Julie, I bet you can't even name, one line. And I was like,
oh boy,
I got this. So I ran through the entire roster, and they were just like, I can't believe you just said that. And the one boy was like, well, you still don't know anything just because you know their names. And I was like, okay, dude, whatever. And I left. I forgot the conversation. And then that night on ESPN, or maybe ESPN2, there was a really good game. And I am going to say that it was like, I don't know, Detroit, St. Louis, Detroit, Colorado. Like, it was something like that. I know it involved Detroit. Okay. And it went to overtime. It was 4-4. And I think it ended 4-4. But it was such a good game, like such a good game. And this is the thing, like, I would watch any game. It didn't matter what, like, and people always say, oh, you grew up with the Flyers. You must have been a Flyers fan. I went to Flyers games for sure. Right. But I was just as happy watching other teams play that did not involve the Flyers at all whatsoever. So anyway, so I go to school the next day, and I was like, guys, did you see the game last night? And the jerk guy, the really jerk guy, says, see, guys, I told you she didn't know what she was talking about. The Flyers didn't even play last night. And I was like, I didn't watch the Flyers, and in that moment, I realized that there were people who
use that face too.
I know. Flyers. But the point is that is when I realized the difference between being a hockey fan and being my favorite team fan. And that there was a difference, and that not everybody that was a favorite team fan was a hockey fan. And so anyways, I used to love watching games on ESPN and ESPN2. And in fact, when I went to college, one of the requirements was that they had to have ESPN2 available in their cable package at the dorms.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because I wanted to make sure that I could watch hockey.
Yeah. Give it up for BU.
Excuse me?
I always want to put you at BU. And I know you didn't go there.
Why would you do that?
But I don't know. For whatever reason, I feel like you should have gone to Boston University. But they clearly didn't have ESPN2. So you didn't go there.
Well, actually, okay, so I'll give you the rundown. I wanted to go to, so for clarification purposes, I went to the University of Massachusetts, where all the cool people go.
Massachusetts. Same difference.
Also known as the reigning national champions.
Oh boy.
Just putting it out there.
UMass.
Yes. So I wanted to go to a school that was close enough to home that I could go home for the weekend, but not close enough for my mom to drive up for dinner every night.
Perfect. That's quite a far drive though from where you grew up though.
It's 5 hours.
Yeah, that's quite a while.
It's not too bad. But and then the other requirement was that I wanted them to have a Division I hockey program so that I could be involved in some way, and that I wanted them to be nationally ranked in both journalism and sports management, of which UMass was. I don't know if they, I mean, I know they are in sports management, and I believe they still are in journalism too, top 10 in the country. So yeah, they just got a whole new journalism studio department wing, everything. So I'm gonna say they're pretty good still.
Okay.
So anyway, I had looked at BU and I wasn't opposed to BU, but I didn't like their campus. You didn't feel like you were on a campus. You felt like you were in the middle of the city. So they got the X. I went to BC and I had gone to private school my entire life, and BC felt like glorified high school where everybody knows everybody's business, and I had had enough of that. So X that off. And then I also looked at Northeastern, and I didn't like Northeastern. I graduated in 3 years, and I didn't like that Northeastern wanted you to be there for 5 to have a co-op year where you would basically do a year-long internship, but you didn't really, it wasn't like you still had to stay for 5 years. And I was like, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to get in and get out and move on with my life. So
while watching ESPN2.
And then I got to UMass and I was like, this is home. Like, this is where I want to be. I clearly did not look at the hockey record because UMass was,
they weren't
terrible. Great. So bad. But in their defense, like, they had only had a Division I program for like 6 or 7 years at the time. So they were pretty bad, but it allowed me to have a lot of opportunity to work with the team, which I did. And I loved it. So yeah, that was a very long story and detour to tell you that ESPN2 was part of my requirements in picking a university to attend.
You guys are the Minutemen, right?
Yes.
And Minute Women.
Yes.
Do they go by Minute Women? They should go by Minute Women. Do they?
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if they're female sports, they're the women's sports team. Sorry.
They are technically, but like we don't have any like gear that says Minute Women on it, you know.
Yeah, that's disappointing. Anyway, you can. I like the faces. You can now reference me as going to Michigan or Western Michigan or anywhere else you want, Notre Dame, anywhere like that if you want to kind of get under.
So every time I see you and I say go blue.
You get one of them.
One?
Yeah. Well, I have screwed this up at least 2 or 3 times with you and BU. So I'll give you like 3. But then
I will say this, like BU is a fine institution.
Yes. Oh yeah. Don't let Cam Atkinson hear what you said about Boston College either.
He'd probably agree. That's totally fine.
He might agree. Anyway, that was, like you said, that was a long way of saying that you're happy about ESPN getting hockey back as you want ESPN tonight, right?
Yes.
And if they do have ESPN tonight, let's hope, both of us, that one John Tortorella is featured prominently on ESPN tonight at least once a week, because it will be appointment television. I'm telling you, if you like hockey and you like personalities and you like funny stuff and you like Ted Lasso, if you like Roy Kent.
I love Ted Lasso. I am so pumped for the
Yeah.
Friday episode. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't want to be any spoilers, but like the cliffhanger from the last episode was like,
yeah, pretty crazy, eh? Right? And I'm telling you, Torts going back to the studio to do hockey is about as close as you're going to get to Roy Kent doing studio work on Ted Lasso as there can be. Okay?
I would love that. That would be amazing.
Well, let me tell you a story. Since I'm going to go on Brian's winding path story here.
All right, hit me.
This is a guy, me, who the past 3-4 seasons, I actually worked pretty closely with John Tortorella as far as he was the coach of the Blue Jackets, and I covered that team, and on the road and at home. 1 year actually with the team, and so traveling with him too. So that was interesting. So I got to know him pretty well. But before all that, he was the coach in Vancouver for one season. It did not go well, as we all remember, if anyone knows anything about hockey. That ends, he got fired there after a year, just wasn't working out. So in that time between the Vancouver job and him taking the Blue Jackets job, I will never forget this, because he actually did do some studio work with NHL Network, I believe. To start, I think it was to start the season before he joined the Jackets in 15-16. So I think it was that 15-16 season. I think going into it, he was doing what he's going to do this season. He was in the studio, and I remembered him from the 24/7 episode, with an HBO, and they had the Rangers and Flyers, I believe. That was one of the best 24/7s that there ever was. I mean, he was fantastic in that. So I'm like, I'm in my house and I'm carrying the laundry, getting ready to, I will never forget this. I'm throw the laundry on the bed, I'm folding it and putting it away. And usually I just throw the TV on, just to kind of have background noise. And all of a sudden I see like John Tortorella on there on NHL Network, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And so like I'm like folding clothes. I'm telling you, he kept my attention for the entire time. He was saying stuff like he's just so direct and so truthful, to the point where it's going to make some people mad. I know that's going to happen, but it's who he is. And he doesn't know how to filter things, because it's not built in. He tries. But who he is, I mean, he's just genuine to who he is, as I learned later by covering him. But I just remember thinking, like, God, this is going to be awesome. We're going to get a whole season of John Tortorella and his insights on hockey at NHL Network, and they're letting him talk. This is great. I mean, I think they had to bleep him out a couple times. It was fantastic television, And then he goes and takes the Blue Jackets job, and I was like, oh. I was like really disappointed that he got back into coaching. I'm like, God, he would have been perfect for that job. Just stay there, be the American Don Cherry, who's maybe not quite as outlandish, but just so direct and to the point, and people would love him eventually, because he's given you the honest, brutal truth, and that's what we all want to hear. So anyway, he takes the Blue Jackets job, and then I end up covering that team, and we go back. We had our sparring matches here and there, but I really grew, to respect him and to really I just love when he talks hockey. If you ask him a question, he's going to tell you the answer, and it's usually a pretty darn good one. And it's usually, there's not a lot of buffered hockey cliche nonsense. He's going to tell it to you how it is in everyday terms that your everyday person can understand.
Well, what I like about Tortorella, and it's not that I think he doesn't have a filter, he just doesn't dumb anything down. So like you said, like he's not assuming you don't know what you're talking about. Like he talks to you like he on his level. And also he doesn't sugarcoat anything.
No.
So like if something was terrible, he's going to tell you it was terrible.
Say it's terrible, not just like
Yeah.
they struggled a little bit tonight.
Yeah. And there's no like compliment sandwich, oh, they
Right.
did this really well. This could use some work. And this was good too. Like there's none of that. It's like,
No.
that was awful. So I think if you enjoy talking hockey, you will enjoy hearing from him.
Yep. And the thing is like my only concern at this point with that is I'm gonna really like. I know I'm gonna like his commentary, and I'm gonna like having him on TV. And then some other coach is gonna get fired, and they're gonna hire John Tortorella back because I know he wants to coach again. I mean, that's what he does. He is a coach. He loves it. Like he's good at the analyst thing. And I think he knows he's good at the analyst thing, but he loves coaching, and I know he wants to coach. So from a personal standpoint, I hope he gets that opportunity again. But from a selfish standpoint, as a hockey fan who likes to have somebody like him, analyzing the game, oh God, I'll be really disappointed again when it happens. But I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it until it does.
Yeah, so enjoy it while you can.
Yep.
Another thing on our list to chat about in this episode are our restricted free agent signings. In the last episode, we talked about how Quinn Hughes and Elias Peterson and Brady Tkachuk were all training at USA Hockey Arena. Well, the Canucks got it done.
Yep.
The Senators are still in a quandary.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, from what I understand, is the Senators want to do a bridge deal. And Brady is not interested.
A long-term deal?
He wants a long-term deal. So here it is. It's about the money, right? So the hook is that they're offering a long-term deal, but only at like 8 million.
Right.
And Brady wants 9.
Right.
Or something to that effect. And the idea is I'm really good now, but things are going to change in 8 years. The cap's going to go up, and my comparable is going to be making more than 9 million.
Yep.
Or more than 8 million. So I want
this goes right, and I'll let you get back to making the point here, but this goes exactly back to what you and I were talking about on episode 1 of this podcast, in terms of guys are wanting to get paid sooner now, because by the time you're a free agent UFA, you're 27, 28 years old. Now GMs are starting to look at you as maybe close to like, getting on the downside of your career, already. Right. Why would I sign you for 8 years when you're 28 years old or 27 years old? So this is that whole dynamic.
Yeah, that is the dynamic. And so now, like, if it's a bridge deal, he wants more.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a lot of give and take there, but we'll see how that all shakes out. We've got like a week before they drop the puck on the regular season. And I know Brady, he wants to be on that opening night roster. He does not want to be watching on TV.
No, and Elias Peterson signed a bridge, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, 3 years. Is it was it 6?
I don't know. There's a website for that.
I'll find it.
So along with that, we had talked about offer sheets, and you are under the impression that GMs don't use offer sheets, like as much as they could or should or whatever.
Right.
And so here's the thing. Not only do you need to have the cap space to pay someone enough, because like, let's be serious, no one's being offer sheeted for $2 million. Like, that's not a thing.
Although on video hockey I've tried it and it works, but go ahead.
Yeah, it could be a thing. It's just not a thing in the NHL.
Right, because everyone's just gonna match it. Like if you do the lower one, they're gonna be like, fine, I'll pay the extra 500,000 or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So so they have to have that, and then they also have to have the assets. And not every team has a cap space available, for sure. And B, not every team has the assets available in order to make a significant offer sheet, or at least one that won't be matched. Because offer sheets have been made, but the team who is on the receiving end of that offer sheet, has
Mm-hmm.
always been in a position where we cannot let this guy go,
Right.
whether that be on ice or with the fans and in the community. Like they have to match that. So they do, even though it is ridiculously expensive, and like in some instances not worth the cost. I'm looking at
Correct.
you, Shea Weber.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
so things like that, they definitely use it. Now here's the thing that you don't know is just because an offer sheet isn't signed doesn't mean a GM isn't using it to their advantage. So I know one GM who wanted to sign a veteran, no, who wanted to trade for a veteran roster player. And the other GM was like, no, like giving him pittance, like a 7th round pick or something like that. Or, you know, it was ridiculous.
He wasn't
He's
giving
like,
them up.
and he's like, listen, if you don't take this, everybody say hi to Jack. Hi, Jack. Um, uh, if you don't take this deal, I'm gonna offer sheet this guy. And
Okay.
the other GM was like, done, whatever you want. Take them. And this GM literally stole this player,
By
like
threatening the offer sheet.
by threatening the offer sheet because he couldn't match it. He was so
Because he,
strapped to the salary cap
yeah.
that if he was offer sheeted, there's no way that they could match it. So yeah, so GMs totally use the offer sheet, just maybe not in a way that you expect.
No, Elias Peterson, by the way, 3 years, 7.35 million AAV, just for those who are wondering about that one after I threw out that ridiculous $6 million number off
That's
the
a
top of
pretty
my
that's a pretty solid bridge deal.
Yeah, it is. It is, at the same time, I mean, it's solid for both of them, right? Like he gets the 7.35 million, which is pretty good. But I mean, he's been an outstanding player. He struggled last year, I believe, to kind of go, score like he did in the first year or two, didn't he? I
Yeah,
think.
to be fair,
Hmm.
the entire team struggled last year.
Well, yes, absolutely. They were pretty dreadful. Um, but anyway, going back to offer sheets, right? Uh, first of all, you're talking to a guy who was one of the very few people at the time who said the um, uh, the Predators are crazy for not taking or for not just taking the picks, right? They should just like it's easy to look at it now and say, well, you should just let them walk, and then you get all those draft picks. Well, I was saying it at the time, and the whole general consensus of almost everybody was like, you're crazy. He's Shea Weber. You got to pay anything you can to keep him. And I really do think it puts the GMs whose players being offer sheeted into a really interesting spot. And because you do have the one commodity on the one hand who you know what that player is and who that player is and how valuable they are. And clearly there's another team that's out there that wants to overpay. I guess you'd say if it's an offer sheet, they're probably going to overpay as to what you want to pay them. So very valuable. But at the same time, if you believe in your scouts and you believe in your development program and you believe in all this kind of stuff, if the other team, if you believe the other team might not be as good as they think they're going to be by getting this player, like I would roll the dice. I mean, especially if it's a huge contract like the Shea Weber one, because you're getting, what is it, 4 first-round picks, something like that. Imagine going 4 years. What if you had your own picks? You hadn't traded any of them yet, and you're going to get 4 straight years of having 2 first-round picks. I mean, you can't tell me that you're not going to get like some high-end talent at that point that ultimately is going to be worth more than the person you're giving up, than the player you're giving up. So that's interesting. But I have heard from a number of GMs that have said I just thought it was interesting, this Carolina and Montreal deal with Cook and Niemi. I thought it was very funny and interesting because I had been told by a number of GMs that, you don't do offer sheets because you don't want to, stir the pot too much. Like, you're just asking for, some other GM to get mad about it and then, have a retribution move against you. And now you're at war with that guy and, offer sheet land. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. I think it's a tool that GMs don't ever use. And I think it would make, the construction of NHL teams a lot more interesting if more of these GMs did this, if they really went after it. But I think what you're seeing is exactly what those GMs were afraid of. And that's what you saw with the Carolina thing. That was so vindictive. It was over the top. It's like, you're going to come after Aho. All right, fine, buddy. We're going to make you pay out the nose to keep your guy who you drafted. What was it? 3rd overall. Kotkaniemi, who was top 5 pick. I know that. And so, but then they end up getting their guy. They end up getting Kotkaniemi, and there you go. Bergeron had the decision to make. So what Bergeron, it's just so interesting. So the Carolina Hurricanes put Bergeron in a position to where he has to eat humble pie and say, that player is just not worth that much money, in my opinion, even though I drafted him really high. And so, yeah, you can have him. Just give me the picks. Just fork the picks over right now. Like, it was so fascinating because it panned out and it played out. That whole situation played out exactly how a bunch of GMs said it was going to play out if you kept doing that, or if you did that. So, and then last year there was a rumor around here in Central Ohio, in Columbus area, about Pierre-Luc Dubois potentially getting a massive offer sheet, which I find very interesting. And we were told by a pretty good source that it was it was being kicked around like a massive contract offer for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And if it had materialized, it may have been in the $11, $12 million range, which is crazy because at that point he was really good, but like, had he really done enough to get that? So that, if you look back on it, Jarmo Kekalainen, GM of the Blue Jackets, all those moves he made not this past offseason, but the year before, or the season before, offseason before. Let's see, buying out Alexander Wenberg, boom, his cap hit's gone. Trading Marcus Nudavara, his cap hit's gone. Trading Ryan Murray, underrated offensive defenseman when he's healthy. His cap hit's gone. They created like $15 million in cap space with like 3 or 4 moves. And everyone's like, whoa, like, and he came around and said, oh, we're really, we're guarding against an offer sheet with Dubois. So he was worried about it too. It's very interesting. The whole notion of the offer sheet is very fascinating. I think it's underutilized, but at the same time, I think we're seeing why.
Well, I think you're seeing why, but I also think it's a very valid point that you make, in that if you believe in your own process, roll the dice. Now, here's the thing. Kotkaniemi is young. So yep. I think the offer sheet should be used on younger players. Like, I don't think it should be used on Shea Weber.
Correct.
And much like you were saying with Nashville, the challenge is he was their captain. He was huge in the community. Like, you want to talk about like a player that was like synonymous with the Nashville Predators, and that was Shea Weber. So I can understand where there was like cause for pause in having that offer sheet or allowing that to happen. But also, Nashville, of all places, they literally grow franchise defensemen on trees. Yes. Like, literally. It is in their water. So it wasn't like you didn't have defensemen who could step in and fill in the roles collectively, at least, if not singularly, of Shea Weber. Yeah, so, hindsight 2020, I give you that. But if anybody thought it would be a good idea to let a player go through an offer sheet, you would think that Nashville thought long and hard about that one. But
what are the rules? So Kotkaniemi, have they signed him yet, by the way? Yes, they did, for 1 year.
It's called, he signed an offer sheet.
Yeah, but it was like a 1-year deal. That's right. So he'll be an RFA next year. Could Bergeron then turn around and offer sheet him back?
Sure.
Oh, it'd be great. Like, let's hope. Like,
They have to
if
have their
Mark
own.
Bergeron,
They have to have their own picks, though. They can't have other people's picks.
right? Oh yeah, I know that.
I don't know what their pick situation is, but like, it's not like they could just return Carolina's picks.
Mark Bergeron, if you are listening, I'm just gonna say right now, Julie and I have given you the next step in this warfare right here. Go offer sheet Kotkaniemi back next year, get him back in Montreal, and give them their own picks back. Well, I guess you can't do that. You have to give them your picks if you have them. I don't know. I have to look all this stuff up, but I've stumbled onto a brilliant idea. Here's the other thing here. I think if I were a GM, I would love it, by the way, if you were a GM and I were a GM, because we would like have all kinds of fun like warfare against each other. One thing that I would like to do if I were a GM, I would like to just to needle people. I think I would use the lower end of the contract offer sheet thing. So like I would just pick out a guy from a roster at random. Like is it Josh Lavo? No, wait,
You
hold
would have
on.
no friends
No, Martin, it's just
in the GM.
hold on. Steven Lorentz. I like someone like that, And I'm just gonna offer sheet him at like $1.5 million or something, and just make you pay the 1.5 or give me the player, just because I just want to do the offer sheet and get a free guy. That's all. Like, what's stopping me?
Yeah, well, you could also just claim a guy off waivers.
I know, but it'd be more fun to say I offer sheeted him.
Yeah, but then you're like overpaying and giving up draft picks. That's a terrible idea.
No, but if there is a low, I think I know. I looked this up. If you give a low enough offer sheet, you don't have to give up anything. They either say we're going to pay him that and keep him, or you can have him. That's it. It's fantastic. I think it's brilliant. Just go again, get Kevin Stenlund or someone like that, and be like, I'm going to offer sheet you, Kevin, at $975,000.
Other GMs. Now, here's the thing. Do you watch Big Brother?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I wish I did.
So I feel like being a GM is a lot like jury management on these reality shows, so like Big Brother and Survivor, because like your peers vote for you to win those shows, right? So you can't be a jerk and win often.
Who wants to win though? I'm just out for having fun. I'm hopeless, but you have inadvertently stumbled on a fantastic television show idea though, Julie Robenhymer, and that would be Survivor NHL GM edition, right? We just put them all on an island. And
they are on an island. That's the point. I'm trying to tell you, there are only 32 of them, and they kind of all have to work with each other and make deals. And if you go rogue, nobody's going to want to work with you.
Mm-hmm. But you're
not going to be able to get any deals done, and your fans are going to be like, "Fire Hedger, fire Hedger."
Are you leading that charge, or you're leading?
No, but I'm just saying that's what they're going to do in a game because they don't like what you're doing, because you're not going to be able to get anything done.
You're talking about a figurative island. I'm talking about a real island, and we just fly them all out there, and we dump them out there, and with television crews. Who comes off that island? That's what I want. Who's your pick? Who's 32 GMs? Who wins NHL GM Survivor?
This depends. Does this island have a Marriott?
Oh, that's a good question. They'd really be roughing it if they had a Marriott.
They'd be roughing it at like the Holiday Inn. Let's be serious.
I think they'd be roughing it like a Courtyard. I want to see them stay at a Courtyard. Come on. I got to.
I once had a player said he felt like camping was at any hotel that didn't have room service.
See, and I'm like the next level down. I'm poor guy where I don't actually like actual camping, but my version of a camping is kind of like, if I had to stay at a Motel 6, I probably would. No, nothing against we're not going to get sponsored by Motel 6 anytime soon, by the way. Apologies there, EP. Anyway, who comes off that island? I'm picking, you know what? I think it's either Stan Bowman. He's been a survivor there in Chicago for a long time now. It might be Jarmo Kekalainen. I mean, he seems like
Listen,
a survivalist to me.
Yarmo is sneaky and he's
Yes.
funny. So
Yeah.
like if he had to play a strategy game, he could win. If he had to play the personality game, he could win that too.
If they had him play pickleball, he'd probably win that one too. You know, he's really good he's a super athlete. I'm telling you, I think Yarmo's in the top 5 to walk off the island there. Bergevin, maybe too. I don't know though.
I would also think something like Joe Sakic or Billy Guerin would be good bets as well.
Those guys
because
are like
they could again strategy and the personality game.
silent assassin types.
We have gone way off the rails.
You gave me such a good idea there.
I know. I mean, I'm not complaining. It is a good idea, but
yes. Anyway, you know what? We can save it we can do a whole new episode on just NHL.
Maybe we could do like a fan voting. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Who would win NHL GM Survivor?
Yes.
But not like Survivor, like you said, Courtyard Survivor.
Yeah, well, I want to see actual Survivor. I want to see Yarmo getting down there and like making fire with like 2 sticks, like rubbing them together. I bet you he could do it. But other people, I mean, I'm sure there's other GMs out there that could do it too. But then you got, there's a pretty wide range in age groups among GMs as well. I mean, you got all kinds of demographics that you can look at to pick your winner. I think fans should take. I think anybody who is in with us on this one, who's watching this podcast, let's see, let's figure it out. Who wins NHL GM Survivor?
I think if we actually like aired it, I think we'd learn a lot about a lot of different GMs.
Oh, it'd be fascinating. It'd be like every week I would tune in for it. Like that's a reality show I would actually watch.
Well, speaking of people who are trying to survive, we have the class of 2021.
Ooh.
A few members of this year's draft class trying to make NHL rosters. And this is the first time in, we'll say recent memory, because I don't know the exact person, where the number 1 pick has not immediately gone to the NHL. That is, of course, Owen Power, who is one of 4 Michigan players who were drafted in the top 10 this year and are going back to Michigan. Luke Hughes is going to be a freshman. He was the 4th overall pick. So to put it mildly, Michigan is stacked yet again. But it also begs the question about who could make the jump from the class of 2021. There were a couple years where we didn't really have anybody. We had like the 1st overall and then nobody until like random fluke, like pick number 21 or something like that.
Right.
So you have a unique perspective with Sillinger in Columbus. I do not like,
Are you going with the eat your young thing again?
Yeah, I don't like when teams eat their young.
Yeah.
Like, let them develop. Let them become an NHL roster player before you just throw them into the NHL. Like we talk about development all the time. And especially like with certain players in certain situations, they are not necessarily making the NHL because they are good enough to be in the NHL and compete regularly, at that level, but more so that they're good enough to make that roster because that roster is that bad.
Right.
That's what I don't like.
Columbus is an interesting situation since you mentioned Sillinger, for a number of different reasons. One, Cole Sillinger came in and he played at the Prospects tournament in Traverse City with the Jackets team. And he, along with Yegor Chinnikov, who's 20 years old, coming from the KHL, I mean, those are the 2 best players in the tournament, bar none. Like they were better than the Robertson kid from Toronto, who's already played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Maybe he just had a bad tournament. I mean, that could have been as well. I mean, he's a heck of a player as well. But there was a lot of good players there, and those guys were. If you were to pick an all-tournament team, they'd both be on the first team. I mean, that's how dominant they were there. And usually, when you have, or I won't say usually, but often, and you've been to that tournament, but often when you're there and you can dominate that tournament, you're at least putting yourself in the conversation of making an NHL roster, because like it's still prospects that you're playing against, but there are also guys there that have played in the NHL, and you're still standing out above them. So he came into training camp off of that. I will say this: so he looked dominant there. He was really good there. Sillinger was, and so was Chinnikov. Then he comes to training camp, and he got put with immediately in like camp scrimmages with Patrick Laine and Jakub Voracek, two pretty good wingers to play with, and he didn't look out of place. He actually played pretty well. They had some scrimmages. Didn't stand out nearly as much as he did in Traverse City, which is to be expected, but he wasn't bad at all. And he did stand out still. He was still pretty good. Then the preseason starts, and like you see where I'm going with this. Like the more the talent level of the opposition kind of rose, the more that Sillinger is not standing out as much as he did before. But we're at a point now, like tonight, we're recording this on a Wednesday. It's going to be the Jackets are going to play. They're hosting the Red Wings tonight. So Sillinger's going to be the third line center tonight. He's gotten a lot of opportunity. He hasn't really stood out in the preseason games, but he hasn't stood out in a bad way either. Like he's very, very close to being an NHL player right now. And the other thing that you have to kind of factor into all this stuff with him is that he's got two different places he could go other than the Jackets this year. So he's 18 years old, and his rights belong to Medicine Hat in the WHL, but they don't have to necessarily send him back to Medicine Hat if they don't want to, because he was actually drafted out of the USHL. Sioux Falls, right? So he was drafted out of there. So they actually have, if they want to burn his first ELC year and say, hey, you need to develop at a pro level, they could send him to the Cleveland Monsters, and he could start off in Cleveland at the AHL level, which would be good for him, I would think. And I think he could handle that. And that way you could toggle him back and forth and, give him little bits of NHL stuff, let him make his debut, let all that kind of stuff, instead of force feeding him, like you were talking about, into the lineup right away, right? So they have that option, or they could send him back to Medicine Hat and say, well, we don't want to burn your first ELC year. You're too important. We'd like to have you for 3. You're only 18. I mean, they have a number of options they can do here, or they could keep him. Now, what's interesting is it might be a little bit like feeding them to the young, eating your young, but this is also a team that is so hard up for centers and people who know how to play center. He is one of them. Like, I will tell you right now, he is one of their best center options that they have, like natural centers in the entire organization right now at 18. He is. But is it going to be for the best for his development, for him to play that role this year? We're going to find out, but he's an interesting case. It feeds right into what you're talking about. Now, a guy who's represented by the same firm, Newport, Mason Mctavish. He was drafted. What was he? Was he second overall?
I think
no, that was Beniers. Yeah, no, he was third. He was third overall. Yeah, because Beniers went second, then it went. I loved Mctavish. I watched a lot of his video and film. He actually sort of reminds me of Jonathan Toews a little bit, and so does Sillinger a little bit. He's not quite as big as Toews. Toews is a big guy. He's over 6 feet tall. But anyway, similar games. I think Mctavish has a shot as well to possibly be a 21 guy who plays this year in the NHL. But he got hurt. Like, he had an injury, I believe, in the development camp. They have the same agency, Newport. I think I said that earlier. So it'll be interesting to see what, and that's another situation. That's the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, you're picking third for a reason, and your centers, Getzlaf's getting. He's gone, right? Getzlaf. I think Getzlaf is gone from there now. If he's not, he's back on a 1-year deal or something. But the bottom line is they need centers too. And so will McTavish make it? I think those are your two hands down. Those are really your only two options in the top 12 picks or 15 picks or so.
Yeah, well, this was a weak year, so that makes sense. But the thing too is, like, I loved both of those guys at the U18 World Championships for Canada, who won
Okay.
gold. Mason McTavish was one of the assistant captains, played a huge role, won faceoffs, played with a sandpaper vinegar, aspect to his game. He's very physical. He's, big enough. Like, he's not like a lightweight. So I feel like at the NHL level, he would be able to hold his own. Cole Sillinger needs all the protein shakes that,
Yeah, he does.
yeah, that
He's
the
not
training staff
small.
can mix up for him.
He's a guy that, like, I look at him now. I was just looking at him, just talked to him today, and he's not small by any means. But like by the time he gets, like, when we see him in a year from
He doesn't
now,
have his man strength.
oh, when we see him in a year from now or 2 years from now, it's gonna be like, oh wow, that dude's a whole lot different, Like
Yeah.
it's one of those guys. No, there's some guys, like you said, McTavish, they come in and like he'll get stronger too, and he's gonna get more muscular and stronger and everything in the weight room. But right now, he's like, you look at that guy and you're like, okay, that dude can probably handle it. He
Yeah.
can handle his own in the NHL, but I wouldn't put it past Sillinger. We're gonna find out one way or another, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him start off maybe in Cleveland potentially, or maybe even with the Jackets, and then they because they don't. Have to, that's the thing is usually when you have an 18-year-old, you got to send him back after game 9 or before game 9, right?
Yeah, this brings back the conversation we had. Well, I actually don't know if we had it in the podcast or maybe it was before the podcast, but talking about the NHL CHL deal and how last year, we should save that for next time. But
Yeah.
we will talk about how this deal is impacting the development of players. And I love that he was, quote, drafted out of the USHL and now has the option
Yep.
to play in the AHL.
Right.
I mean, we talked before about like the silver linings to this pandemic and how, like things have, shook out. That's a huge bonus if I'm
Yeah.
Cole Sillinger. Like, sign
Yep.
me up. That's great. So it'll be interesting to see. And then the other thing that will be interesting to see this year is who is going to tank.
Ah,
Now,
yes.
I am not
Well, you can't say
necessarily,
tank, Julie. It's like against the NHL religion to say tank.
I don't have a problem with tanking. Like, I really don't.
Nope, me
You
neither.
know who has a problem with tanking?
The NHL
Maybe.
on the
But I
record.
was thinking more fans who are paying
Yes.
to watch in person a team that is horrendous by
Correct.
choice.
It's true.
So, and the challenge here is that those ticket gates, the receipts from those, the money, the revenue generated from those ticket sales pays the salary of everybody, not just the
True.
players, but of the entire organization,
Yep.
along with TV deals, like all that stuff. So I get where they're coming from, where as a fan, you're like, we're paying for you to play like crap.
Right.
I get that.
Yep.
So don't come at me. I
Right.
feel you.
No, I get it too. I understand it.
But like from an organizational standpoint, like you have to get worse before you can get better for
Yes.
most organizations, because it is not easy to wait to draft from within. Like, I feel like that's what you're seeing with teams like the New Jersey Devils, who've been focused on, we're going to draft, we're going to draft, we're going to draft, we're going to build from the draft. It's going to be like 5 to 7 years before like we really consistently see these players stepping in. And they've been plugging holes with college free agents. They've been plugging holes with picking guys off of waivers. They've been plugging holes with veteran PTOs. They've been plugging holes with so-called minor deals to bring in veteran guys at a low salary to keep costs low while they are in this transition stage, waiting for their draft picks to develop. And I appreciate that the Devils have not rushed many, if any, of their draft picks, although I could make the argument about Jack Hughes, but that's a discussion for another day. I feel like, they have done what they've needed to do to keep costs low, to be as competitive as they can be with what they've got. And, follow through on that process. And some teams just have to do that. You have to build through the draft, because it is not easy, and B, expensive to build through trades or free agency.
I think a few things happen that scare the living daylights out of GMs with the whole tanking notion. One is they're not super confident in either themselves, and they don't want to admit it, or their scouting departments and things like that, because they're going to look at it. Some of these GMs are going to look at this and say, oh, great, I get the number 1 overall pick, or I get the 2nd overall pick, or 3rd. There's no guarantee that guy's going to be a star. And what if I get so great, I get the 3rd pick in the 2nd round? Well, that guy, it's 2nd round pick. And every round you go down, you're lessening your odds of having an NHL player. That's one way to look at it. And I think and then if you do look at it that way, you're going to look at it and say, I'm not going to be around here much longer if we screw up all these picks, right on the nose. So then that prevents that kind of thing. But then I think there are some GMs who are very confident in their ability to pick players and scout players and rank them and all that kind of thing. And I think they look at this and say, I'd love to have a top 5 pick. I'd love to have 1 or 2 drafts where I pick like 3rd overall in every round, including especially the 1st round, but including the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. And I'll build what we need here if I can get higher picks, right?
The caveat to that, and why I was saying you're hitting it right on the nose, it's not a GM's fear that this player isn't going to pan out. It's that we're going to draft this guy number 1 overall, or 2 or 3, whatever. And am I still going to be here? Am I going to be able to weather the storm in 5 years when he's a stud?
Yep.
Because that player still has to develop. We've seen it. Alexis Lafreniere was like the second coming.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, not in this rookie year, no.
Exactly. So even the best players still need time to develop into NHL players. Like, that is what the draft is. We are projecting 3 to 5 years plus. And how will this player be able to contribute and help our team? And so from a GM perspective, if we suck, if we are terrible enough to be picking that high, then am I going to be able as a GM to weather the storm of being that terrible?
Yeah.
And see this plan through? Because so many GMs, they sign a 5-year deal. Ownership says we're in it for the long haul. And then ownership lies and says, nope, we don't want to, we don't want to wait 5 years. We want to be good right now.
Right. Yeah. And it takes an organization, the entire organization, to commit to something like that and say, yeah, it may take a few years, but the payoff is going to be worth it. And I feel like there are examples all over the NHL. If you just point them out and say, look at how this team built their, monster. Look at this team. If you want to be one of those teams, you got to get some of those draft picks, especially in drafts where pretty much every scout from every team is universally in belief that that's a good draft. So next year, 22, every scout in the league feels that's a good draft, especially at the top. 23 is looking pretty good too. So if you're one of these teams, I had a GM tell me, and I think he's 100% bang on accurate with this, is you do not want to be that team that picks 16th every year. You don't want to be 12th, 5th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th every single year, because you're just not going to get the kind of high-end talent that you need by moving up in the draft farther, top 5 picks, top 10 picks. Those are impact player picks if you have a good scouting department, sometimes even if you don't have a good scouting department. So ultimately my opinion on tanking is, I get the whole, like you said, I get the whole ticket thing and trying to make money and the fans, all that. But ultimately, the fans want you to win, and they want you to win big. And if you keep band-aiding it every single year, you're not going to win. You're just going to kind of keep middling around through the middle of this 32-team league, and you'll have bright moments, and then you'll win a series here or there, but you're never going to win the big thing. The big prize, the Stanley Cup. Very, very rarely has it been where, oh yeah, we got 10 different free agents or whatever, and we just cobbled together a team and we won. It doesn't happen that way anymore. So I look at tanking and I say, you're trying to win. Yes, you're trying to lose. I mean, you shouldn't try to lose, I guess. I mean, that's where the distaste comes in.
Here's the thing. They're not trying to lose. They are
Right.
trying to manage their assets. Right. So if your assets are down here and the rest of the league is up here, you're trying to manage your assets. This is all we've got.
Right.
We can't be like this because we don't have those players available. They are not in our asset pool. So with that in mind, we have to keep costs down. Like, we're not going to go after free agents, because it's just like making a big fish trade at the trade deadline. You really should only do it if you legitimately have a shot to win the Stanley Cup and just need like one key piece.
Yep.
And usually it's not like a big piece. Like, look at Tampa Bay in acquiring like Blake Coleman.
Oh, and everyone's like, oh yeah, everyone's like, oh, you give way too much. Yeah, sorry, they're like, oh, you give up way too much for Blake Coleman, and oh my God, you paid what for Barclay Goodrow? He sounds like a law firm. Well, he does. But you know what? He's also a 2-time Stanley Cup champion now, along with Coleman, because they made those deals. You're 100% right on that
one. So at the deadline, you're usually not like looking for that quote big fish. You're just looking for like a complementary piece who can kind of push you over the edge. Or if you are a team that like quote needs to make the playoffs because you need a playoff ticket gate or some kind of something. But even that to me is rushing the process. Like, if you are not going for the Stanley Cup, you really should be a seller on, unless there's like a really good deal on like a player locked up long term kind of thing out there. So things like that. And it's the same with, if you're rebuilding, don't rush the process. Like, I have Devils fans who are like, we're cautiously optimistic about this year. Like, should we be? And I'm like, you were excited. Yeah, you shouldn't be. So like, they're like, oh, well, we got Dougie Hamilton and, Jack and, all this stuff. And I was like, listen, you were excited 2 years ago when you drafted Jack and, traded for PK Subban. So how'd that work out for you?
Would you be better with Shane Wright or not? Would you be better with Brad Lambert or not? Like those are the kind of things that you have to look at. And like the Jackets, the team I cover are very interesting. Cover for the Dispatch, by the way. I need to get that out there. But anyway, it's interesting because I feel like one of the worst things, I hate to say this, but I feel like one of the worst things from a big picture standpoint that could happen for this team this year is for them to make the playoffs and then get dusted in the first round or something. And then you're going to get like a 18th pick or 19th pick. And then it looks like the Hawks are going to be at least competitive for a playoff spot. They got Marc-Andre Fleury now backing them and that kind of thing. What if they make a playoff? I mean, the worst thing that could happen is you get 2 first-round picks next year and they're both in the 20s. They're going to get some good players because they have really good scouting department, but they're not going to get the kind of impact, game-changing, we need this guy to win the Stanley Cup type of players that they could get is if they missed the playoffs and finished with like a top 5 pick again,
Well, we'll wrap it up on this, but I will say all I know is that this year's World Junior Championship is going to be so freaking good that if you do not make these games, and even like the quote inconsequential games, with like Slovakia and Germany, if you do not make those games must-see TV, or at least record them to watch later,
Right.
you are doing yourself a disservice, because you are going to have the best players of the 03 group, which was just drafted.
Right.
I'm doing the math. The 03
Right.
group. So you're going to have, if available, the two guys we talked about earlier, Mason McTavish and Stillman. But then you're going to have all the Michigan guys. You're going to have the Swedes. You're going to have the Swedish goalie Waldstad. So even at their lower level, they'll be good. And then you'll have some guys who are knocking at the door. Like, you can't tell me Mishkov isn't going to be at the World Junior Championships.
Correct.
Like,
for Russia. Yeah.
I'm there. Connor Bedard, I'm there. And
Sure.
then, Shane Wright could make a play for it. There are a lot of guys who could just really, and these are only the 18, 17, I guess Mishkov will be 17 by then, but 18 and 17-year-olds. Like, we're not even talking about the 19-year-olds who are going to be there.
True.
Like,
yeah.
Must-see TV, World Junior Championship. I am pumped. So, on that note, we didn't want to go over an hour.
We went way over an hour, didn't we? Yeah.
Miserably.
Failed.
So, I'd like to say we're going to try to do better next time, but
probably not. It's all the GMs. So I'm going to blame all the NHL GMs for, I don't know. I'll just blame them. The Survivor thing, it was all, I'm like, it just got me off track,
Yeah. Deflect.
I will deflect.
I like it. I like it.
All
right. Well, that'll do it for episode 2 of Not Your Normal Hockey Podcast. Brian Hedger, Julie Robenhymer. We'll see you next time.